A top story this half hour, Limpopo is the latest province to conduct forensic audits into municipalities that place the money with VBS Mutual Bank. Municipalities in Gauteng, Mpumalanga and the Northwest provinces deposited approximately 1.5 billion rand with the bank. 8 out of 15 municipalities that placed the money with the embattled bank were from Limpopo. The Vembe district municipality placed the most amount at over 311 million rand. National Treasury has estimated that municipalities may only end up recovering between 10 and 40% of, or rather 40 cents of every rand they place with the bank. Another big depositors included Fitakhomu, Greater Tubatse local municipality and Greater Giyani municipality. The bank came into prominence in March this year when the South African Reserve Bank placed it under curatorship, citing liquidity challenges. Joining us in studio, local government consultant Afigile Bili and resident analyst and business anchor Harold Bupalamo. We're also joined by the CEO of Wealth Forum, Zandile Nkale, on the phone line. Good evening to all our guests and thank you so much for joining us. I think it's always good to recap and talk about the genesis of where VBS is, perhaps to even identify what the role of a mutual bank was supposed to have done operationally with municipalities. We found out, Harold, that this was in fact an abnormally. It was illegal. It was not supposed to have happened.
Absolutely right. I mean, there's different categories of banks as per Reserve Bank rules. And one of the reasons for doing that is for facilitating easy entry into the banking sector for people that maybe don't have the capital to start a full-on commercial bank. So you would have a cooperative bank and in this instance a mutual bank, which is an easy entry into the market. But because they provide easy entry into the market, they're also regulated differently. So one of the reasons why it is illegal for municipalities to put money in a mutual bank, and it would probably be much the same story for big corporates, they would also not be able to put money into a mutual bank because of the risk issues. The fact that they're not regulated as stringently as the big commercial banks don't have the asset base and the balance sheet size to support big deposits.
Okay, so now that that has happened, they're under curatorship. There is the concern that the monies may not be recovered, over 2 billion rand or so, affecting many of the cash-strapped municipalities. Figile, what have you uncovered as a local government consultant in the lack of processes or systems generally when it comes to finance management?
Okay, thank you, Cindy. First of all, allow me to celebrate Afro World. It has bring back the pride of African people. At least we own a TV station and we are credible. The
chairperson is watching, I'm sure. So on his behalf,
on behalf of Mr. Manyi, we are saying thank you very much. Our pride is back. I'm saying to you, Cindy, going forward, I have a problem with municipalities. We deploy people without capacity and credibility because at the end of the day, we deploy people who are going to make resources, not people who are going to look after the interest of the communities. At first, I was very exciting when I saw VBS Bank. I was proud to say for the very first time, we as Africans, we've got our own bank. But according to what the municipality has done, especially in Limpopo, I was very disappointed because even those deposits that they make in VBS, they will never be able to recoup that money back. And currently I'm asking myself, was there a council resolution when those monies were deposited into VBS, or was it individual decisions to invest the money? And why was it not made public? Why did municipalities deposit money without the buy-in of even local government in Limpopo? You see.
I suppose the other question that we need to satisfy is the need for economic transformation and inclusion. That maybe in our zest to want to have a black bank, that the mutual bank is probably not the best way to go about it. If you want to effect meaningful change, you should rather go for a fully fledged licensed bank. And I want to get a response from the CEO and wealth manager of, or rather Wealth Forum, Zandile Nkale. Good evening to you, Zandile, and thanks for your time. What is your view in that regard, that the approach should rather be for a licensed bank if we want to see transformation in the finance sector?
Good evening, and how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Are you the CEO of Wealth Forum?
Yes, it is Wealth Forum Africa.
Aha, there we have you. I've got your title, your designation properly now. All right, so your view and how we go about this economic transformation in the finance sector.
Because now that everything has happened and many people have been affected, it would have been nice for people to rather start with the fully fledged bank, because with the mutual banks, there's so much risk. You know, we get excited that, hey, here's a Black African bank, and we all are excited, but we don't know what it is that needs to be done in order for people to gain financial freedom. Because look at how many people now are at risk, municipalities, small businesses. People are now at unease because they don't know what's the way forward.
And I mean, how are you putting your presentation together for a mutual bank? If I understand what you're saying, that the experience that one has would have to be highly specialized, especially for a commercial bank, that perhaps the mutual bank is a better entry point.
So what we do, we teach people on financial information and how they can get better value out of their money. So if more structures are in place, then there is less risk. So I feel like they should have done a lot of market research than go fully on mutual bank.
Okay, just stay on the line with us, Andile. We'll continue here in studio. What is the recourse for municipalities? Because again, these monies would have to be recouped or recovered. Is the executives going to be held liable, or is this something that can squarely be put at the doorstep of the municipality, Harold?
Well, the principle of curatorship is largely to protect individual depositors, so mom and pop, right? So businesses, government entities are last in line. So in this instance, because a lot of the money isn't there, the municipalities are going to take a haircut. So in effect, they're only going to get somewhere between 10 cents and 40 cents on the rand. They're not going to get the full deposits that they put in the bank. The priority will be to protect the individual depositors. So those will probably get their money in full, but not the municipalities.
And the role of the Reserve Bank, and I know that we're not necessarily comparing the similar time periods, or rather that policies at the time with the Bancorp, Absa Bancorp scenario are different to the democratic dispensation. But is there an opportunity or even an obligation from the Reserve Bank or government to bail out VBS?
No. The government or the Reserve Bank does in certain instances step in to bail out banks. But that's only in the case where it presents a systemic risk to the whole system. So in the case of African Bank, for instance, there was a 5 billion rand injection. But you must remember that with African Bank, multiple banks were also providers of financing into African Bank. So there were many other banks that were affected, and the numbers were large. In this instance, they can afford to ignore it.
1.5 billion rand, just down the drain.
Yeah. In the bigger scheme of things, it's minuscule.
You know, Cindy, I'm of the view that sometimes politically, we don't have brave politicians. I mean, if Cindy Mabi is a chartered accountant, he's a bank manager, you know, I'm a cashier, what makes you think that as Africans we cannot start our bank? I mean, all our banks are not owned by South Africans. They are owned by foreigners. You know what I mean? So even if you look at the issue of land, this thing of taking land away from whoever, we will never be able to take that land if we don't own mines, banks. Because if we are going to start farming, who's going to finance our farming? So I'm saying to South African politicians, we need to start a black bank that is going to make sure that even those municipalities will bank with that bank. Because at the end of the day, the economy cannot be controlled by the minority, whereas we, the majority, we have got more numbers, but we are more impoverished. So I'm saying, if our politicians want to see this country going forward, we need to establish in our bank. What is a bank, Cindy? A bank is a software. If Capitec can be established, what makes you think Fikile cannot start a bank? You understand what I mean? So we need our own bank because all these banks are owned by foreign investors. We don't want foreigners to own our economy. We want to take over our economy as Africans so that we must be in the forefront of the economy. But for as long as we have politicians who are not great thinkers, who are with empty stomachs, who are not visionaries, we will never own our economy. Today, who's printing our money in South Africa? Our monies are printed outside South Africa. You know, the foreigners are controlling our economy. That's why even our municipalities are failing, because they cannot be financed to run their projects because of why banks are local. We need our bank.
And Zandile, you think that the VBS demise has given us another dynamic in how we view the access to market for black consumers, that there is a choice for one, and also a specific financing that a black business may require? Is that where we should focus, as opposed to saying, oh, well, there's another failed black attempt, for example? It did have its benefits.
Yes, I feel like it did have its benefits because people like in Stockfells and small groups have gotten finance from it, and they managed to move their businesses from A to B. So all I'm saying is that there needs to be another way that we can also regain our faith in black banks.
Okay, so what is that way, Harold?
The two most important principles in establishing and running a bank are trust and risk. Right. So, and trust derives from the people that run the bank and the behavior of those people and the behavior of the bank itself. And what was glaringly apparent here is that there was a lack of good conduct amongst the shareholders, or maybe not the shareholders, but the directors and the executives. That's one thing. The second thing is the risk element requires that you must manage the bank as prudently as possible. Banks take deposits from ordinary people, and when those people demand those deposits, the bank must be able to hand back the money to those depositors. They cannot behave in a way, it doesn't matter whether they're black, white, or green, they cannot behave in a way that endangers people's deposits. So those two principles are paramount in starting a bank. That's the first place to start. The second thing is, there's nothing particularly wrong with starting a mutual bank. It's actually a pretty decent way to get into banking. Michael Jordan, who used to be the CEO of FNB, is now starting a mutual bank. And why? Because it's a much less expensive way to get into banking if you want to start a bank. And what a mutual bank allows you to also do is that ultimately you can make your depositors also shareholders in the bank. So if the VBS guys had run this properly, they very well could have created one of the biggest banks in the country that would have been owned by the depositors who were largely black. But they ran it improperly.
Okay, and any hope of trying to revive or to restore or to re-engineer the bank to be that potential giant in the industry by following the mutual bank policies and act and getting the locals to invest in it?
Look, Cindy, I will tell you this. When VBS was established, was government there to support VBS? Was National Treasury there to support VBS? You know, if they, as government, discovered that VBS started a bank, why they did not call VBS in and see how can they support them in order for them also to grow in terms of having branches and etc. But all I'm saying, going forward, Cindy, we do have black academics who can start banks, who can run banks. Let's leave VBS out. We still have black people who've been bank managers for more than 5-10 years who can start a bank. What Treasury needs to do, they need to make it a point that they recruit black people who will start black-owned banks and they open branches, and they need to give them support because foreign investors will never invest in a black bank. So we as Africans, for us to grow economically, we need to establish our own bank.
Yeah, but we're talking about taxpayers' money, which will obviously enjoy more scrutiny than what the private sector would. And Harold, whether there will be accountability. You were saying that this money is essentially going to be a bad debt that has to be written off, but somebody has to be held accountable.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I think both in the municipality management structures and within the bank itself, people will be held accountable. Remember as well that this is not just a case of a bank that just ran into trouble because of economic circumstances. It appears there was fraud involved. So when the curator moved into the bank thinking that what he's going to do is to seek to rescue this thing and rebuild it so it can come back, in better health, they actually found that they then had to appoint somebody to investigate fraud within the bank. That changes the landscape completely, all right? So because of that, the executives are now probably going to be ultimately charged for criminal acts. It's unfortunate, and it's very unpleasant for a black bank to end up in that fashion. But that's the reality of things. You can't excuse people because they're black when clearly money that's been lost.
Yes, but in the first place, as Mr. Bill is saying, that there hadn't been adequate support where it could have expanded and had the necessary infrastructure and possibly even changed its license conditions if the government had an appetite to empower VBS.
Look, I mean, that's a fair point. But clearly they didn't struggle for access to decision makers, did they? Because they got the deposits from government institutions. But they did it illegally. So given the fact that they did have access to influential people in the public sector, they really should have taken a different route, and ultimately they should have applied for a proper commercial banking license before they called in the deposits, and then it would have been fine to take the deposits. But they did it under a mutual bank license, which is illegal.
Okay, and Zandile, maybe talk us through your difficulty as the Wealth Forum South Africa and a key stakeholder in wanting to see transformation in the economic or finance sector, especially with cooperative banks. What are the low-hanging fruit that communities can take up as a collective, invest their monies in there, and grow their own local economies?
My biggest difficulty was support. When you start something and you've got people who are qualified in that industry and they've got the experience with them, we don't usually get support from government and many other stakeholders as we would love to. So I feel like if people can come together and come up with solutions that they can tap into the market, and if government can invest their money or their resources in solutions and people who are qualified, that would be much better for us. If they can be open to partnership.
Yeah, but what is the climate or the environment currently? Because we hear the demeanor from the Reserve Bank that they don't want to destabilize the big five, because if you were to have a black bank, for example, and you have clients en masse now transferring their accounts to that particular bank, it will destabilize the economy as it stands, yeah.
But then does that mean that no other black bank would play into that industry? Because we need to give each other a chance as well. There are people who are hungry and capable to tap into this market, to also give out lower banking fees. Like, for example, with the tax increase this year, many people have been struggling to keep up with banking fees, especially if you're a small business owner. So we are trying to close those gaps. So I feel like if people can open themselves to that possibility, and it's not like we are trying to destabilize the big five. We're just trying to also have a place in the national role.
Stay on the line with us, Harold and Fikile, whether there is an appetite for mutual banks, or you've cited the example of Capitec. It took them 18 months to have a commercial license, and we know that they're cooperatives who are not receiving the necessary compliance licenses for whatever reason. They may not be, filling the necessary requirements, but nonetheless, we're not seeing that kind of movement as quickly as we desire.
Cindy, I will blame our previous finance ministers. I think they were more interested in foreign investors compared to local investment. I mean, Cindy, a bank is a software. If Capitec can start up a bank, Capitec is not fancy. Even FNB is not fancy. A bank is a software. I am saying for South Africans to realize their future and for South Africa to take control of their economy. I'm saying this without fear or favor. I will never vote next year if I don't have a black bank. We need our bank. We need to establish our own bank. We need to run our own economy. We are sick and tired of being controlled by foreigners. There's an insurance company which has just been approved to start their own bank. all these insurance companies and white-owned banks, they are the ones who are running our economy. We are the majority here. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that if tomorrow we want to finance Afro-World, we should not go overseas. We must do things locally. For black people to realize the growth of economy and to be part and parcel of this economy, we need to establish a bank. We don't want excuses from politicians. They must stop this thing of going to talk about foreign investors. We don't want foreign investors. We want local investment. We are saying to government today, I am saying to them, we want to establish our own bank because our people today, if Cindy's got a new concept of a franchise, you want to start your own franchise, they are not going to finance you. We don't want to depend on the state to finance black people. We want to be able to have our own bank whereby we are going to empower each other, just like the way white people are empowering each other, because we need this economy and we are sick and tired of being told about foreign direct investment. We want local investment. We are enough in terms of popularity as Africans. So it means if we start our own bank, we can run this economy.
I think Harold was taking a more pragmatic and prudent approach to how we come to a more inclusive economy, especially in the finance sector, that it has to be about trust and risk, and you have to play within the ambit of the law. And whether currently the policies allow, or whether it's just at a stroke of a pen, the courage that is required in leadership to approve a black bank, Harold, or is it a little bit more complex beyond software?
I think it's a little bit more complex than that. Just to give you a perspective, the things that we don't see in a bank, the obvious things that we see on a daily basis when we interact with bank, are the tellers, the ATMs, maybe the app and the website, that sort of thing. Those are the interfaces that we have with the bank. Behind all of that, there's extremely sophisticated treasury operations, balance sheet management, pricing committees, and when I say pricing, I'm talking pricing of products, for instance, and it's products, standard products like savings and that sort of thing, and checkbooks and so forth. But even pricing for loans, which is ad hoc stuff, where there's very, very sophisticated practices, and there's also extremely stringent regulations. And a lot of these regulations are not even South African regulations, they're global regulations. So in 2008, when practically the whole world collapsed, the regulations for banks had to be revised, because what was happening was that banks were engaging in practices that were putting depositors' monies at risk. So these global regulations were amended quite significantly to ensure that depositors are protected. So banks were engaging in practices, for instance, in derivatives, as an example, that were very difficult for regulators to monitor and manage. Very sophisticated financial products that really were in many ways irresponsible.
Mr. Billy wants to counter that.
Cindy, I hear what the gentleman is saying. All these policies are not local policies, they are European policies. Let me make you an example. Do you know of a black rating agency in South Africa? All the rating agencies are Moody's. Moody's is rating us. Will they allow Sakumzi in Soweto to rate America? They will never. The Moody's are the ones who are rating us because they want to keep our currency at a low level so that they must micromanage our economy. I am saying those policies are foreign policies. They are favoring them. Like I said to you, we don't even print our own money. Our money is printed overseas. So I'm saying we are going to establish a black-owned bank with a black rating agency, because America will never allow South Africans to rate them, but they are rating us in order to keep our currency low. Going forward, South Africans should have no fear or favor. We do have academics, visionaries, men, credible men and women who can run a bank in South Africa.
And Harold, thank you so much for that wealth of research, and understanding the complexity of the finance sector. And Zandile, as a entrepreneur, how then do you navigate that space to realize your dreams and ambition to grow a wealth forum for women, particularly black people in general, and society at large?
For me, what I've learned is the best thing is to start small. Start where you are and start where you can. So, for instance, if you're in the rural areas, use whatever resources that you have to move forward. If you're in the townships, use whatever you have to go forward. So start small and bit by bit come together and work together.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Lovely meeting you, Harold. And joining us in studio is a local government consultant, Figile Pili, and we have our resident analyst and business anchor, Harold Bupalamo. And on the phone line, we had the founder and CEO of Wealth Forum South Africa, Zandile Nkalai. Thanks for watching. Join us on social media. We continue after this.